Welcome everyone to Good Knits. For those that are new here, I'm Sherry, and today I've got a special episode for you. Now that we are about halfway through summer, I have personally been doing quite a lot of summer knitting, and I find myself really sticking to the yarns that I'm already comfortable with. So I really wanted to start looking at what else was out there that I could give a try, because I have a personal goal for myself this year to branch out and explore new yarn brands, new fibers, and just see if maybe I can find something new that I really fall in love with. So I did a poll on Instagram, got some great recommendations. I've also been keeping track of yarns that I have come across just through watching podcasts or looking at Ravelry, and I wanted to take an opportunity to share the 15 yarns that I am personally wanting to try or to knit with a bit more. The list started at about 40 yarns from the recommendations that I got. But I narrowed that down also based on how accessible I found some of the yarns, the price point, and realistically if I felt like the color palette, for example, would work for me. So hopefully there are quite a lot of new yarns in here that you haven't tried before, but if there are, then that's great. Let me know your thoughts, because I haven't worked with many of these, so I really want to know which yarn I should try next. This is going to be a bit of a new filming style for me, so I plan to share my computer screen as I'm talking through the yarns. I figured this would be a good way to actually share the full color palettes, a bit more of the product detail, and that way, since I don't have the yarn to actually hold up and share with you because they're not in my stash, at least not most of them, this way you can get the full picture and see if it's a yarn that you would want to work with. I also have captured all this information within a list that I'm going to link to in the show notes. So don't worry if you don't want to take notes throughout this episode. You can just click on that link at the end and go to the full product list of what I've shown here. That will also include links to the yarn brand websites as well as the Ravelry pages, so you can see pattern recommendations for that specific yarn. I figure that would be the easiest way to really communicate all the information for everyone and make that as accessible as possible. Since most summer projects, at least that I knit, tend to be in smaller gauges, I've also intentionally kept this list of yarn to light fingering up to DK weight, because personally I don't really like anything heavier than that in the summer to work with. But know that I have intentionally picked a few yarns on the list because they come in lighter or heavier weights as well. So hopefully you can find a yarn in here for a Aran weight project, for example, and then just go find the equivalent yarn from that brand in the heavier or lighter weight. So just so you know, and I'll include that in the notes within the list that I link to when there is an equivalent option. Because also what you could consider is, if you like a yarn in here, potentially holding something double to get to the yarn weight that you want. I've also only included one yarn per yarn brand here, and that was intentional because there are a few brands on this list where they have so many amazing summer options that the list could have been overrun with those brands. So when I'm talking about them, I will also mention that they have other options, and that is a great one or a great brand for you to go check out if you're looking for a different yarn composition, different weight. Perhaps those brands would have something for you. And final point, I really struggled with planning this video to decide how to break it out, either by yarn composition, yarn weight, price point, brand, and ultimately I landed on I'm going to do this by yarn weight. I figure that's easiest so that you can kind of organize what you're looking for based on the specific weight of your project. But I do include pricing information, weight, yardage, all of that within the list that I'll link to. So all that information is there. I will talk about it a bit today, but I'm going to go through from the lightest weight up to the heaviest, and hopefully that works for everybody. So also within the chapters for the video, it will include the different weights so that you can go to each section if you're looking for a specific weight of yarn. As I'm going through the yarns, I would also love to see in the comments if you've tried any of these yarns and what your thoughts are, because then that will help me narrow down which ones I should try next, or also give an opportunity for other people to see the comments and decide for themselves what works best for their project. I would also love to know what your absolute dream summer yarn is, something that you haven't tried but you're just dying to, it's been on your list, and that's the next thing that you're gonna reach for. I want to know, because I want to keep adding to this list and having just a whole bunch of yarns that I can try for future projects. So please don't forget to leave a comment for that, because I am very curious to know. I think we have all the housekeeping items out of the way. Hopefully you guys are still just as excited to see what yarns I've selected. And with that, I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen and talking through each of the yarns in a bit more detail as we're looking at them together. The first yarn on the list is my absolute favorite. I wanted to make sure to at least include one Knitting for Olive yarn because they do have some really nice summer options. And based on the fact that I have personally knit 5 garments already in this pure silk, I figured it really needed a place on this list because I know a lot of people still haven't worked with it themselves. So if it's a yarn that you haven't tried, I really, really recommend that you do, or you find a similar alternative. So this is 100% Boret silk, and it says fingering weight, but I would classify it more as a light fingering in this case. And it's 250 meters for 50 grams. This yarn comes in a really nice color range. So there's 36 colors total to choose from, and I personally have knit with quite a few of them. So I have a Cumulus tee on my needles right now in Putty. I have another Cumulus tee in Plum Rose, a Milady's top in the Dusty Artichoke, and then a Cami number 4 and a Milady's dress in the Deep Petroleum Blue. So yeah, I'm obviously a fan. I think though, for the most part, I've worked with the majority of colors that I personally am gravitating to here. So the only other one that's on my list is this olive color. I also find this yarn quite well priced, so $7.50 per ball, and for 250 meters, this yarn goes quite far. So as an example, I bought 7 balls for my Milady's dress. I only used, I think, 4.5, 5 in the end. So from my perspective, that is quite a good price for a full dress. I know most tank tops that I've made only require about 1.5, 2 balls. My Cumulus tees are about 4. So for me, that is a price that I'm willing to spend on a summer garment. And for this quality of yarn, I'm very happy with it. So the second yarn on the list is also a pure silk, and that is the La Bien-Aimée Silk Tweed. And I don't have any of this yarn at home, so I can't personally speak to the differences between the Knitting for Olive and this yarn. I'm not sure if the tweed actually makes a difference here, because the Knitting for Olive pure silk also has a bit of a texture to it. It also, I would say, feels a little bit tweedy. It's definitely not a smooth yarn. So perhaps this is the same. It is also 100% silk, but it says silk noil, and I'm not sure if that is different than the Boret silk, but it's also raw, made from waste fibers like the Knitting for Olive. And this also comes in a pretty good pretty good color range. It is 37 colors total, but you can see quite different. And this could be a really good option if, for example, you are someone that likes variegated yarns. Personally, they're not for me, but I know a lot of people like to knit with them, and probably in the summer would be the perfect opportunity to do that. So there are some really nice options just for solid colors, but then also your variegated. The main difference here obviously being the price. So $7.50 per ball for Knitting for Olive versus $25.80 for $2.50 for 50 grams. So it's definitely more of an investment, but if you are just interested, for example, in knitting a tank top, again, you'd probably only need 2 balls of this, and maybe if you really gravitate to some of these colors, this would be a great option for you. So I wanted to include that because even though it is, I think, by far the most expensive yarn on the list today, It is really beautiful and gives you a nice option for a replacement for the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, and maybe something a little bit more special. And then the final light fingering yarn is a Gepard Garn Cotton Wool 3 Organic, and this has actually got certified, and I am personally really enjoying Gepard yarn, so I knit with it for the first time in the Wild and Soft for my Sonia tee this summer. And that is a 60% merino wool, 40% Tusa silk. Also a really, really nice option. But this came up a few times in the Instagram poll, so I want to include this one specifically. This is a 50-50 cotton, 50-50, so 50% extra fine organic cotton, 50% extra fine merino. And perhaps if you live in a really warm climate, the addition of the merino here might be a little bit too heavy, but this could be a nice option if, like in Amsterdam, you tend to have a slightly cooler climate all year round. This is a yarn that I would consider using because I think it would be quite transitional with the seasons. This comes in 37 different colors. Their website seems to be a tiny bit broken, but you can see quite a nice color range. I personally really like, I think this truffle is more of a purple color. I also really like this brandy. There's also some really nice blues and more turquoise colors. So I think this could be a really good option. And the reason that I included Gepard is they also have a Cotton Wool 5 organic version of this, which is the Aran weight. So this comes in a heavier weight if that's what you're looking for. And I would just say in general, Gepard has quite a lot of options. So there's the Wild and Soft, which seems to also have 2 weights. They have the linen line here, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. And also an Athena yarn that I believe is another blend. So Gepard is a great one to check out if you just want a summer yarn and you're looking for a different blend than the 50-50 cotton merino. So yeah, really nice option here. It is around $665 per ball, and it's 230 meters for 50 grams. This yarn is pretty similar in meterage to the Knitting for Olive cotton merino, difference being the cotton merino from Knitting for Olive is 70% cotton, 30% merino, which is maybe a nicer blend for summer, but the cotton merino from Knitting for Olive comes in 31 colors, this comes in 37, so you have a bit more option here, and maybe you'll find something that is a slightly better fit for you. Moving on to the fingering weight category, I am going to start with a yarn that is completely new to me. I've never heard of this brand until it was recommended on the Instagram poll, and that is the Permin Elise yarn. And it is 90% cotton, 10% cashmere with 150 meters per 25 gram ball. So you definitely would probably need to buy a few extra balls in this case, but it's only about $465 per ball, so not too badly priced. 22 colors. I see that the color palette here is a little bit more muted than some of the other brands that I've looked at, and for some reason you can't click into all of these different colors. There we go. There are some really nice options here though, and it seems like this yarn has a tiny bit of a heathered look to it. So that could be really nice if you want to give some visual interest to a piece. I don't have a ton to say about this. I picked it primarily because I really like the idea of that cashmere, and I thought that this could be a nice yarn to try just to explore something completely different to me. Next up, we have a brand that I am really starting to fall in love with, which is Isager. And I've personally not worked with any of their summer yarns, but there were quite a lot on the list. I opted to include here the Trio 2, and it is 30% linen, 30% cotton, 20% Lysol. So a little bit reverse to your typical like Sandnes Garn Line, which is 50% cotton, 33% linen, or some variation of that amount. There is a Trio 1 and a Trio 2, and the meterage for this one is 175 meters, 50 grams. It comes in not the biggest color range, so also only 22 colors, which is the same for the Trio 1. But the nice thing here is you do have options. So you could have a lace weight that you maybe hold double, or you hold this fingering weight with the Trio 1 lace weight to get maybe more of a sport weight yarn. So I think there are some really good characteristics of this. This could be a really, really nice option that gives you a lot of versatility for summer because you can work with either one of those brands. They also have a few other summer yarns like the palette, which I did originally have on this list as well, just because the construction method is quite interesting, but it doesn't seem readily available for most places, so I removed it and decided to include this Trio 2, which I know a lot of people have really said they enjoy working with. I'd be curious to know if having the 50% linen makes this a little bit harder to work with. Is it difficult with, is it hard on your hands when you're working with it? Or is it a lot like the Line yarn, for example? For all of you watching from the US, I of course wanted to try and include a US brand, and so I opted for the Knit Picks Lindy chain. Knit Picks is a brand that I've been wanting to try in general. It's high on my list, but it's almost impossible to get here in the Netherlands. I think I'd have to order from the UK or order to Canada and have somebody ship it here for me. So I plan to, when I go home to Canada next, place an order for Knit Picks. I believe this will probably be on my list. It looks well rated. This is a 70% linen, 30% Pima cotton chainette yarn. And I have never experienced a chainette yarn for the summer, but when I have worked with wool chainette yarns, I've really enjoyed them. So very curious to see what this would be like. You can see here kind of how that looks, and it seems very similar to like a Drops Air, for example, but I'm not sure how that would feel with the linen. If anybody's worked with this before, I'd love to know your thoughts. It comes in a pretty decent color range, so it's 22 colors, or sorry, 26 colors. I was looking at the Isager. And it ranges in price. Looks like there's a sale going on right now, but let's just call it $7.99. It would be around the same in euros, so I'm just gonna say that. And yeah, I think I really love some of these purples, like the plum and the urchint, and also this holly berry, for example. So high on my list, definitely something that I want to buy and explore using next season, since I won't be able to get my hands on it this year. Then we have a Canadian yarn, actually, and this is the Illimani yarn and the brand Sabri. And it is a blend of organic cotton and baby alpaca. So not sure what that would feel like. I haven't worked with a ton of alpaca in general, but I think similar to the cotton and cashmere, I'm really curious how the cotton and alpaca would feel. This is 100 grams, 400 meters, so quite big, skeins of it. Color palette is pretty limited here. It's only 21 colors, and the price is a bit more on the expensive side, so I did some searching. It's around 15 euros, but you get quite a lot of meterage, so definitely I think it would take you further than expected. And yeah, I think this new color here, the Acadia, really gorgeous, as well as the Regatta blue. Probably not my color, but definitely a very vibrant, rich, beautiful blue. Moving on, we have another favorite brand of mine, which is the Filcolana. And I completely forgot until somebody reminded me that they actually also have a summer weight yarn, which is the Merci. And this is a blend of cotton and merino, so 50% wool, 50% cotton, 200 meters for 50 grams. And it is, where's the color palette? 36 colors, so definitely one of the more robust color ranges. And this is personally my kind of palette. So I really, really like this grape color. I really like the fern, the flint, and I think this is going to be probably the next yarn that I try, maybe for the new Florence top. I think it's the mixed rib cami, I forget the exact name, but I was really wanting to do that in a purple color, and I was having a tough time finding the right blend, so I didn't have to do it fully in merino. And I think this has the perfect color palette. It is not quite the exact same meterage as the Knitting for Olive, so it's 50 meters less for 50 grams, so you probably would need to make a slight variation to maybe your needle size to get gauge, but nothing that's insurmountable to make this work. It's also quite well priced. It's $5.95 per ball from most places I found it. That's in euros. So I think, yeah, pretty reasonably priced and a little bit on the cheaper side than Knitting for Olive as an option. Then next, and the final fingering weight, is the CaMaRose. I am definitely not going to say this properly, but Bogaluis Samarul, and it is 100% organic merino and cotton. So this is starting to gear a bit more towards maybe a fall yarn. It's more merino than cotton, so 70% organic merino, 30% organic cotton, 230 meters per 50 grams. And it has 32 colors and runs about $5.45 per ball. So very, very similar to the Filcolana, quite well priced, and really nice color palette here. Again, a little bit maybe more vibrant, really beautiful kind of plum rose sort of color. And I really like this deep copper. And this yarn is also GOTS certified. Moving on to the sport weight yarns, I have 3 to share with you. And the first is also a new to me brand, which is the Pascuali Suave yarn. And this is 100% organic cotton. And it is 162 meters, 25 grams, and it comes in 25 colors, which you can see are all quite rich. Maybe a bit brighter than I would tend to gravitate towards, but there are some really beautiful options in here. One reason that I decided to pick this yarn, even though it's 100% cotton, which I don't tend to work with a lot, is because of the construction method. So similar to the Lindy chain from Knit Picks, this is not spun or twisted. It is more of a cotton mesh tube. So they don't specifically say chainette anywhere, but if it's a cotton mesh tube, I'm going to assume it's very similar in construction to a chainette / blow-in yarn, which it does say it is reminiscent of cashmere and or mohair, which would be very interesting for a summer yarn. So the fact that it's cotton, I imagine would make it very, very breathable, but it definitely has more of a halo effect on it. So I would love to just buy some of this and play around and see how it is, because it's not really something I would have gravitated towards until I started to look into it. This is GOTS certified as well, and they mention it's a great alternative for people that have a wool allergy. So I think also if you are doing fall winter knitting, perhaps this is an option to look into as a replacement to your wool yarns, because maybe this will give a very similar feeling or like overall drape and texture to what you would want from a wool yarn without being wool. Then we have the Rerum Natura yarn, the Antigone linen. So this is 100% linen, 260 meters to 100 grams. and it's definitely on the pricier side. So $17.50. In general, Rerum Natura does seem to be a bit pricier than other brands, but I worked with them on my Salty Day sweater. I used which yarn was it? The Gilead, and I really enjoyed that. I definitely want to try more yarns by them, and I really like the color range here. So it comes in 35 different colors. I am curious, since it's 100% linen, how this would feel, but look at how beautiful that looks with the lace. So I think this could be really nice. I had considered buying this to pair with the linen I already have for my marigold tee because I need a contrast color, but I think $17.50 is just a little bit too pricey, though if I only need one ball, I might actually give in and give this a try. So stay tuned. This might actually end up being used by me in the next coming months, if it makes sense cost-wise with my project. But yes, very beautiful yarn. Looks like it would be nice to work with. And I think it does say that it actually is quite soft. I also noticed it is wet spun in Lithuania, even though the yarn, like the flax, is actually grown in Normandy. So interesting, because Lithuania definitely seems to be a linen hub. And then the final sport weight yarn is one that got mentioned by multiple people in the Instagram poll that I did, and this is the Summer and Cashmere yarn by BC Garn. And it is 90% cotton, 10% cashmere, 165 meters per 50 grams. Clearly, people really like this yarn. I haven't worked with BC Garn before, but I know that for the Sonia tee, the Bio Balance was the yarn that was originally recommended for that pattern. So very curious to try them. This comes in 27 different colors. It's got certified and definitely on the brighter side for the colors, but really, really beautiful. Similar to the Elise yarn, this cashmere is also blended with cotton, so very curious how that would feel. I think this would likely be the yarn I'd try first. It is $6.90 per ball, so not too badly priced, on par with something like a Knitting for Olive. And yeah, I'm like, which color from this would I pick? I really like this color 28 and color 5. Moving into the final category and final 3 yarns, that's the DK weight. And this is top of mind for me right now because I've been knitting a Farnham tee, and I think there's quite a lot of great patterns that are DK weight. So the first one that I want to mention is one that has been coming up a lot as people have been recommending alternatives to Sandnes Garn Line, and that is the Drops Design Drops Bell yarn. And the reason this gets recommended is it is a very, very good price. So this is $2.50 here, but I found many sites that had it for under €2. It's on sale quite a lot. It is the exact same content or like yarn composition as the Sandnes Garn Line. So 53% cotton, 33% viscose, 14% linen. And it is 120 meters per 50 grams, which I believe is just 10 meters more than the Sandnes Line. But they, I think, definitely could easily be swapped for each other. And this comes in how many colors? 20 colors, so quite a limited color palette. But if your deciding factor here is price, I think this is an amazing alternative to the Sandnes Line or pretty much any other DK weight linen yarn out there. So definitely want to try this. I have had pretty good luck with Drops yarns for the most part. I work with their mohair a lot. I use their extra fine merino superwash for a sweater for my nephew. That was good. I think the only yarn I haven't really liked is the cotton merino, the Pima cotton merino that I use for my blouse number 2. And then no summer yarn list would be complete without Sandnes garn, and I opted to include the Line yarn, so I did find many other options for a linen replacement for DK, but I opted to still include this one simply because it comes in different weights. So there is the Tick Line, which is the heavier weight, I think Aran weight of this, and it also has a Tin Line, which is the fingering weight. The color range is not one-to-one comparable. So the other two definitely have less colors than the DK weight, but the Tick Line, so the heavier weight, has the least amount of colors. But this is 35 colors total. It's the exact same yarn composition as we just went through for the drop spell, but definitely you have a much bigger range of colors here to choose from. Definitely some deeper colors as well compared to the drop spell. So I just worked with this one, for example, the olive green, which I really enjoyed. I've also worked with the 1015 kit, and it's a great yarn. I don't really have any complaints about it, other than you do sometimes have fibers coming out of it a little bit. It can be a little bit prickly, but this is a great option. It is 110 meters per 50 grams, and typically the price for it is $5.95. If you want an alternative to this, I am also working right now with the Svarta Foret Cecilia yarn, and again, the exact same yarn composition, exact same meterage. It just has a slightly different color palette, but from what I can tell from working with both in my last two projects, they are pretty much identical in every way. So that's another option for you if you can't easily access the Sandnes garn, or you're just looking for a different alternative and you are looking for maybe a specific color, perhaps that brand would have it. And then the final yarn on the list is the Rosários for Nature eco-friendly collection 100% cotton yarn. And honestly, Rosários 4 came up by so many people in that poll. I've also just been recommended them a lot in the past, and it was really hard to pick a yarn. I noticed in the poll I did, most people didn't even name a specific yarn. It was just Rosários 4, so I was very confused. And then I started to go through their website, and they have a whole category just for spring, summer, which is then broken down even further. 31 yarns within the eco-friendly collection, another 9 in the classic collection. So a ton of options for spring, summer yarns. For sure you'd be able to find something here. This is a brand from Portugal. I really want to try them. This has a huge amount of colors, 42 colors total, and it is 50 grams, 137 meters, and the price is around $4.25. So not badly priced. Yeah, I think 100% cotton, not really top of the list for me, but if I do ever have another pattern that calls for it, I would definitely consider this. But in general, I'm just gonna go through all the Rosários 4 yarn and see what else might work for me, because it was a bit overwhelming when I was preparing for this video. There's just so many yarn options, and I probably could have included at least 10 different yarns simply from them. So maybe that will be a future video, just going through and maybe even buying a different mix of yarns from them and seeing which ones I like. So very much a brand that we should all try, super curious, and thank you so much for all the recommendations. So that brings me to the end of the list. That's 15 yarns that I have tried or want to try for summer. I'd love to know which yarns you have used yourself or which ones you're planning to use. I think there's so many great options in here, and like I said, the yarn list that I originally had was around 40 different options, so there are so many great yarns if you just look for them. and I'm very excited to start working my way through this. Thanks so much for joining today and watching. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like the video, but also subscribe. I post podcast episodes every 2 to 3 weeks. So as I try out these yarns, you will be sure to see them in those future episodes. And if you're curious, then I'd love for you to follow along and join. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next episode.